My name is Rob Maciel. I'm the co-founder of PawnFi. It's a peer-to-peer lending protocol that lets you use NFTs as collateral. So you can use CryptoPunks, Bored Apes, any ERC 721. You can essentially take out value against the NFT. I've been in crypto since about 2016 or so. Big NFT fan, like a lot of art block stuff. And we've been building PawnFi. I've been working on this for the last year or so. Something, it sort of occurred to me about a year ago when starting to collect NFTs. There's not a lot you can do with NFTs. You can buy them, you can sell them, you can just really speculate on them. You can't really do a whole lot with them as a financial asset. You're really kind of just stuck, speculating, buying and holding them. And that's not normal for any typical asset class, any other typical asset class. You can use those assets to borrow against them for lending purposes, a normal credit market. So we sought to solve that. It's kind of become quite a journey. I think most people in here have never borrowed against their NFTs. There's only been a handful of NFT loans out there. And the reason for that is there's just really nascent kind of poor supporting infrastructure right now. There's projects like Upshot. There's marketplaces. There's just not a lot of good data on NFTs. So to be able to know what they're worth, be able to borrow against them is pretty challenging. But we're getting there. It's definitely getting there. The real problem is really consensus around pricing. Like on a normal exchange or even a DEX, you have an Oracle price, right? So you have a consensus price on what Bitcoin is, what Ethereum is. But for NFTs, we just have basically last sale price. We have floor pricing. We have some bid-ask history, but a lot of that can be faked. So how do you essentially create these capital markets when you don't have this essentially efficient pricing methods? So yeah, that's a problem. Like, what are we going to do about that essentially? As you can kind of see, I highlighted here. Basically we have floor pricing, right? Most people would look at floor pricing as like the bottom, the cheapest you can get an asset. But that's not a good proxy for value of an NFT. If you own a CryptoPunk, it's worth 300 grand. That's a floor punk. But you could own a CryptoPunk that's a zombie that's probably worth millions and millions of dollars. The floor price doesn't really do a whole lot for you, right? So if you're trying to borrow against these really rare assets, that floor price is just not super great. So we need to essentially have more and more data out there to be able to have efficient, on-chain pricing. So we've started this process. There's not a lot of infrastructure yet, but we built this protocol that lets you essentially take value out against NFTs and borrow against them in a peer-to-peer fashion. So peer-to-peer works really well because that consensus around pricing is just decided between the two users essentially, the borrower and the lender. To date, we've done about $3.5 million in protocol volume. The platform is actually not live to the public yet. It's in a private release. But we did this was an example of a really big loan that happened on the platform. And essentially this consensus around the pricing happened between the borrower and the lender offline. They're mostly in Telegram groups. The lender in this case was a really big institutional lender here, and they and the borrower just kind of came to terms on what these 5 NFTs. It was a few Oshus, a few pack pieces. They came to terms on what those assets were going to be worth, and then what essentially they were going to allow that borrower to borrow against those assets. What they figured out what an interest rate was, and the length of the loan as well. So that works so far in a peer-to-peer fashion, but it's not like really DeFi yet. It's not like really simple and autonomous. You go to Aave or Compound, you're able to borrow against those assets really seamlessly. We're not there yet for NFTs, but we're getting there. That's essentially what we're kind of starting to talk about is liquidity pools for NFTs. To get there, we essentially need on-chain oracles. That's I'll keep kind of harping on that. That's a big problem for the space that is needs to be worked on. And then, essentially these liquidity pools where you can essentially, borrow against a value of an NFT against resting liquidity like, USDC or stablecoin essentially. So those things are being worked on by, platforms like us and Upshot. There's a number of other, platforms out there that are kind of working on this, building out this, financial infrastructure for NFTs essentially. Yeah, that's about it. It's really just to talk about, what's kind of coming down the pipeline, for NFTs and, essentially financialization of them. Thanks.